Welcome to another edition of the Nations of Coaches Growth Series, a higher level of play. Coaches, I'm so glad that you have chosen to join us today. I'm excited that you want to grow. At Nations of Coaches, we desire to serve you as you grow in your coaching journey. We want to help you lead like the master coach, Jesus Christ, and guide all that you influence into a deeper walk with him. Today, unbelievable topic. Unbelievable. We're going to talk about year one as a head coach in a new program. Strategies, thoughts. What do you do when you get your first head coaching job? What is your interview is done? You did a great job. You got the offer, you accepted. The press conference is over. What now? What are your strategies? What are your priorities? How can you get off to a great start? What do your first 100 days look like? So let's go. Coaches, we're going to learn from a great one today. Coach John Jakus, the head coach at Florida Atlantic University. Welcome, Coach, to our NOC Growth Series.
Thanks for having me. Really glad to do this. On a weekly basis, one of your guys, Jim Good, comes in and meets with me and prays for me and tells me what I'm doing well, what I can do better. He speaks truth into my life.
Yeah.
And so the fact that I can do this for y'all in light of what you've done for me this first year is wonderful. And then another guy, Scott Brewer, obviously spent almost 7-8 years with us at Baylor. His son is one of my son's best friends.
Yeah.
And they're in a discipleship accountability group together. But Nations of Coaches has truly helped me. So I just want to say thank you for having me.
Oh, Coach, man, that's great. Jim Good is a good one. He works
He
really
is.
hard, and we all love Brew. He's a character. I talk to him weekly and enjoy my relationship with him. As we all know, Coach Jakus just finished his first year, as my good friend LaVal Jordan says, in the seat. Moved over to the seat. And I know most of you in the profession know who Coach Jakus is. He's had an incredible journey. But for those of you who don't, before we tip off, I want to share with you what his journey has looked like. A high school coach in Cincinnati, a big chunk of time with athletes in action, taking teams overseas, 2 head coaching jobs overseas in Bulgaria and Macedonia. And then, Coach, your career went Drew, Drew. So
That is true.
off to Baylor as a GA, back into the States, and off to Baylor, and then to Gonzaga, where you played for the Natty, played for a national championship in 2017, and then back to Baylor, where you won a national championship. Our good friend Jerome Tang. We love Coach Tang, and now the head coach at FAU, and super happy for you. And what an impressive career. And wife, Sarah, 3 kids, 3 children, 2 sons, Brady and Cal, and 1 daughter, Harper. Super impressive, super blessed.
Yeah, I was just on the phone with Jerome Tang about 15 minutes ago. So actually just normal talk. It wasn't even about this. So he loves the Lord, big influence in my life. I know he sits on your board right now. And yeah, my story is a little bit different, starting as a high school coach, but the large chunk, you're right, was with AIA. So combining faith and basketball at the same time is really where my career kind of sat and where I wanted it to sit. But then I had a son, Cal, diagnosed with severe autism. So we left our time from overseas and came back. And then Scott, Mark, and Scott, or Drew, Few, and Drew, saved my family's career. And we just happened to do some winning along the way, but it's a story that probably only God could write. I didn't see it coming, but I'm thankful for it. Now we're hanging at FAU.
Yeah, awesome. All right, Coach, you ready to roll?
I am. Far away.
Okay. All right, coaches watching, get your pen out, get your laptop out. Coaches, if you see my head down, I'm a note taker. I'm excited to learn from Coach Jakus. I love to learn. I love this profession. And I remember my first day, Coach, many years ago. The press conference is over, and sat down in the bigger office. So yours was March 24th, 2024. At the age of 48, God called you to FAU. You took that head coaching position after a great run at Baylor. The press conference is over as we talk. The hugs are done. The ink is dry on your contract. You sit down in the big office. Coach, what was day one? From day one, what were your initial priorities?
My first priority was to drop my wife off at the airport that morning because she
Yeah,
came in for the press conference and couldn't stay. And I don't think that we could ever undersell the time away from your wife and kids. My oldest was a senior in high school. I wasn't there for the last 3 months of his, final time. We were supposed to go on a hunting trip and didn't get to do that together because kind of once you take that job, it runs the ship for a little bit for your family. So
yeah,
we spent 5 months apart, and it was a long 5 months, but totally necessary. So once I dropped her off, I came to the office. I actually didn't get to sit in the big office because Dusty May was moving to Michigan about the same time, and his staff had not moved with him. So I came in the door and was initially met by everybody that used to work for Dusty May. I spent probably 10 or 15 minutes with each of those guys that morning when I got back from the airport and dropped my wife off. And then my very first thing with this transfer portal and all that is I met with every one of the players just to see if we had a chance, if we could keep them. And I don't think that's unique to being a first year head coach. I think that's just part of our profession at this point.
right.
So you're basically taking what used to be a crazy transition to a new location and being a head coach, and you're just pouring gasoline and fire on top of it with the transfer portal. And then you sprinkle in the fact that in the last year and a half, this NIL thing has kind of gotten off the rails. You're trying to figure out what your budget is, and I just think for the most part, the most of my thoughts went to the roster and then
Yeah,
taking care of the kids well to see if we had a chance.
yeah, yeah. So after those initial priorities, and you've accomplished those, let's
Hmm.
zoom out a little bit
Yeah,
and let's look back on your first 100 days.
yeah,
So if we look back on your first 100 days, other than staff and roster management, what was your to-do list? What did your to-do list look like?
yeah. Few minutes simple. Roster, staff, scheduling, relationship with the athletic director, and then now in the last couple of years, um, since I left Gonzaga, NIL. And I just think you have to make those categories the overarching themes of your days and your decisions. I had turned down some other head coaching jobs in part because I didn't feel like the people I wanted to work with were going to come with me. And there was something about taking the job in Florida where I got to keep or bring some guys that meant a bunch to me, either from my time at Baylor or my time at Athletes in Action. And so because of that, I had a couple phone calls to make. And I'll be honest, I got probably a little over half the staff I desired. And then I had a couple guys tell me no. And so at that point, I felt like I had 3 or 4 that were really going to be here with me. And I needed to sit with those guys and make some decisions. The next thing is just the roster piece. Uh, how can you get one or two quickly? And then how can you build around that? And I just felt like initially those things are found in your relationships. And whether it was my relationships from overseas or some from high school and the recruiting I had done at Baylor, I felt like we had to get 2 or 3 on the board just so we could take a breath because I needed to get 11. And that's
Mm,
just a daunting number in the beginning. And then scheduling was an incredibly difficult thing for me because we were left some things that were just uphill battles. We had to play in the field of 68, and then we were also scheduled to play in the Charleston Classic for
yeah,
ESPN, both unbelievable events. But it meant that we had to spend 20 days away from FAU living in Charleston. And when 10 of your first 15 games, because of your budget, what was left you, and then you have to fill certain dates with the hope of being in that large bid. And I have to be bought. So when you add those 3 or 4 elements on top of it, to have 10 of my first 15 away from home was actually something I wouldn't recommend to anybody. But a lot of guys, a lot of guys, their first job is not going to be a high major job. You're going to have to schedule and you're going to have to schedule road games.
yeah,
And so that's probably one of the very first things I would change, but that was almost dictated to me. So I just had to go through that. And then you're fundraising and trying to explain to your new boss what an appropriate number is at your level in light of who you can get. And then even that is a moving target. And so those 4 or 5 things, they dictate the larger picture. And on days you feel like you're winning, on days you feel like you're losing, but you're just kind of plowing away. Um, and then I would say on top of that, you're trying to take care of yourself. This is a caveat that I would say has nothing to do with the profession. Am I lifting weights? Am I hydrating? Am I reading my Bible and praying? I moved 4 times, I think. I was 2 weeks in a hotel. We got a frat house for our staff where we lived on the intercoastal, and everybody lived there without their wife and kids. There was 6 of us working 18-hour days together, making phone calls, looking at the water and trying to figure this thing out. Then I went to living in a dorm, which
Oh,
was crazy. I had a 21-year-old female RA, so I would just walk in my dorm room and shut the door and hide out at night and go straight back to work. And then my fourth move was into a house, and I slept on the floor for over a month because my wife's and our things had not moved yet. So I just slept on the floor there. So I think there is an element is, can you still make your main thing the main thing, which is, can your faith in Christ still kind of dominate your day, even though everything else is trying to take your focus away from that?
what a great answer. So, coaches, taking notes, staff, roster, relationship with your AD, that's so important. You're just getting to know your new administration to take strategic and intentional time with your administration. That's really important to sit with your new staff because you got to all get on the same page and get aligned. That's great. Fundraising, take care of yourself, get 1 or 2 or 3 guys quickly on your roster so you got some momentum, and then making sure our faith is remains our priority. It's incredible. You talked about your staff a lot. With the staff, I know when I was coaching, we spent an amazing amount of time together. You want to have a staff that is not only productive, but also that you enjoy being around. So when selecting your staff, going through that process, you spoke about it. You had some guys in mind that you ended up not getting. What were your priorities as you look to fill out your staff from the top to the bottom?
Yeah, I mean, that comes down to, okay, relationships. I wasn't really open to hiring anybody I didn't know. Now I ended up doing that once on my staff, but I wanted to try to be with people that I knew and trusted and had done this with before. That's something I took from Coach Tang. I know that other people have different opinions, but he would say you need to hire people that are loyal to you, and your first year is going to be incredibly difficult with winning and losing. You don't need to wonder if somebody in your hallway doesn't have your back.
Yeah.
And so I felt like I was going to pull from people that I knew. And then I wanted from that to cover some things that I think are just really practical. I hired Jordan Fee, who I had coached with Athletes in Action. He was a Division II coach at Nova Southeastern for 8 years. They won a national championship. They play that unique style, score over 100 points. Then he went up to Gannon College and had the greatest turnaround in college basketball history. Gannon had won 3 games a year before, and then 32 with him. He's a national coach of the year. But as much as I knew him, I was at his wedding. Was with him with Athletes in Action. Not only was a great coach with a unique system that I think would have made me better by hanging out with him, he had recruited the state of Florida for 8 years, and I feel like I needed one of those. You know, I ended up hiring Todd Abernathy, who was on Dusty's staff. He didn't want to move. I went to Trinity in Chicago. Todd was actually the head coach at one point at Trinity in Chicago. Great player from state Indiana. Played at Ole Miss, was all SEC guard. But Todd had a unique ability to not only recruit internationals, but then get them into school.
Mm,
And we didn't have anybody who knew FAU. And there's an element at every school that's special when it comes to getting international kids, especially in quickly, because it's not like we had 2 years to recruit them. You got to recruit them in 2 months and get them on campus. And Todd was a home run international recruiter. And because of where we're located, it's one of the reasons I wanted the job. Miami's a pretty direct flight to a lot of places in Europe and Africa, and over half our team's internationals is what I did. For Scott, a part of what I did was recruit internationally, and then obviously Gonzaga was always blessed by the idea of having international kids on
right.
their team. And then, when I lost my ministry overseas, coaching professionally with AIA, There was part of me that the missional part of me, the international part of me was kind of taken. And so for me to keep that um, almost ministry with overseas kids, I just thought that that was a really special thing. So I always wanted part of my staff to have somebody who was specialty in that. And then the one guy that was at my press conference is a guy named Aditya Malhotra. We were GAs at Baylor together. Then he worked at Baylor while I was at Gonzaga. And then he left Baylor to the tail end after we won the national championship together to go work in the NBA for the Phoenix Suns. And so I wanted somebody with some NBA player development front office experience. I felt like
Yeah.
with NIL,
Mm.
budgeting NIL, understanding how to spend your money, what percentage should go to which position, what analytics are we choosing, how in the transfer portal. I used to recruit kids for 2 or 3 years. I'd be best friends with their parents by the time they said yes. And now you don't even get to speak to the parent anymore. They just call and say, how much are you giving?
Yeah.
And I didn't want to do it that way. I wanted to have some foundation and base for our choices. And I just felt like the NBA aspect of that front office piece was pretty special. And then I wanted to hire a Baylor GA because the GAs at Baylor did such a great job with player development. And I'd been to 4 straight NBA lotteries with our Baylor guys that we recruited and coached. And but the guys who hang out with the players the most when we're not around were our grad assistants. And one of the best player development grad assistants I've ever seen or been around is a guy named Devon Parker. He was with us at Baylor, played at Cedarville for Pat Estep.
Mm.
Pat says he's one of the smartest defensive minds he's ever coached. And so he left us at Baylor to go to Furman. But when he was willing to come, I just felt like that was a home run. I was going to get a young player development guy that I thought was pretty special. And then I hired 3 former players that I coached: Isaiah Austin, Obama KK, and Eric McClellan from Baylor and Gonzaga. And I just think there was something about their love, loyalty, youth, the fact that we had gone through hard times together, and to give young, strong African American men a chance to get into this business meant a lot to me because they had changed my life. And so I just think you can see most of it, it just flowed from almost the Holy Spirit's um, the things that warm my soul, you know, ministry to young African American men as a coach, ministry overseas with athletes in action, making wise decisions. Who can flesh those things out for us? And then how can we be unified, but then have enough special gift sets that, because you know this, you're only as good as your players. So you got to get
Yeah.
guys that can get guys. And
Right.
having that balance was incredibly important to me. So um, there's a lot more that went into it than that, but I think you can see some of it is from my heart, some of it is relationships, but some of it was also very practical. I just felt like I had to tick some boxes if we are going to be okay.
Yeah. Terrific. Looking back, year one, coach, what was your biggest success or a couple big successes?
I think the biggest success is to get through it in a way where I think my wife and I are better friends than we've ever been.
Oh,
And
great.
I think there was a lot of ups and downs in that. But friendship is not the absence of problems; it's the existence of issues, and yet the ability to forgive and walk through those things together the way Christ forgave us. And
Mm.
we had our problems, but I would say that if we look back now, especially in the last month, we've had some times to sit and think and talk. I think I'm closer to her than I've ever been, and I'm incredibly thankful for that.
Mm.
Um, I am not a coach; I am a person, and I just happen to coach. And I learned that both through the successes at Gonzaga and Baylor. You know, we lost in the national championship to North Carolina. That didn't feel great, and then we won at Baylor against Gonzaga, and I can tell you 2 months later the effects of that wears off. And
Yeah.
the only thing that really matters is who God has made you as a person. And I would hope that people would say I'm a good husband and a good dad far before I'm a good coach. So I think that was a big deal. And I talked to a couple guys about that because it's the first year, you know this, it'll overwhelm your marriage if you're not careful.
Yes. Yes.
The second thing is I know that people would not say it because we lost so many to the portal, but I would be hard pressed for you to call up any of the players that I coached last year and ask them if Coach Jakus said "I love you" to them at least 100 times in a year. And I would bet to the man they would all say that I did. And we didn't get to keep our players. I think 4 of them we made into millionaires, as odd as that sounds. But that's just kind of the way this is. And I don't think we lost the ability to love our guys. I don't think that we may not get them for 2, 3, 4 years like we used to, but we'll just have to learn to do that in a shorter context. And there's probably some things that I could have done better in there or wanted to get more from, but we'll grow from that. But that was probably the second priority. Third thing, I think my assistants, we do some things differently. We never practice more than 2.5 hours. At times we'll only go 2. And I always leave them an hour to do film and player development. I don't want my GAs and managers rebounding for the guys. I want my assistants to do it. So every day at 7 a.m., you're going to see Isaiah Austin or Jordan Fee in the gym with 2 of our big men. And I would say my assistants spent more time in player development or personal relationship with our players than over 90% of the programs in our country, in the country. So when it said, how do you spell love? Time.
Yeah.
I would say that I did not let the fear of the profession or my first year interfere with my ability to delegate to the coaches that they should be most proud with the time they spend with the players we have, not the ones that we're trying to get. And even as we got in the second half of the year, and we knew probably a couple guys we couldn't afford to keep, we didn't stop that habit. And I think we were faithful to the end. And I would say we're probably pretty proud of that.
Yeah.
And then, I would say this is maybe weird, and I'm not trying to hype up Nations of Coaches, but I did not stop meeting with Jim no matter what went on. And there was never a time where I didn't let someone speak into my life. It never went more than a week. We had a tradition before every game, the way we prayed. Every week he would come in and cover something with me. Sometimes we would take a week off from this discipleship plan he put into place, and we would just speak about my heart or my convictions or my failures. And I think I let myself be taken care of. That might be a weird way to say it, but as a man, we don't let people take care of us. And I think that's something I'm pretty proud of. Practically, I think we had the best first year in the history of the school, but I find myself just disappointed in not winning more. You know that as a coach. And so even though that might be true, I probably feel some failures around that more than successes. But I'm working on that. And we're going to find ways to relish in the wins. But I'd say in giving myself some grace, that's probably 3 or 4 things I would be proud of.
Coach, we've been doing a few of those. That's one of the best answers that I've heard. We've done a bunch of these podcasts now. That's one of the best answers that I've heard in our 20 or so podcasts. That's rich. Flipping the page. What were some of your biggest challenges in year one? Not failures. What were some of your biggest challenges?
I think letting go of the things that I loved. At Gonzaga, I probably spent the most time with the guys. I took them out to eat on the road. When the assistants were doing scouts, we were at Cheesecake Factory, and I think I would define my career that time as much by my relationships with the players as anything else. I think my time at Baylor, I would define not just by the guys I recruited, but the guards that I coached in our little guard U group. I still have those group texts, and I think the way I was able to minister to them and spend time with them. I would say 2 of the things I'm best at or most called to would be player development and time relationships with guys. I mean, it's why I got into the profession. It's how I transitioned from AIA into college sports, is by taking care of the players. And I completely had to let that go.
Right.
And that was hard on me.
Hard.
I'd go into the gym and I would be jealous of Demond when he was working out the guards. Like, I'm just being honest. Like I
No,
look
I
at
get it.
the job that AD did with Caleb Glenn. and he went from 1 of 9 from three. He shot 41% from three last year on I think 118 or 19 attempts. He's our leading scorer. 80 saved that kid's, or at least relaunched the trajectory of his career. And I think I miss that. And so one of the hardest things for me was giving up something that I felt gifted or called to. And it's just not being the dominant part of my job anymore. The second thing is it doesn't matter what anybody says. When you go from a private plane to a not private plane,
Yeah.
there is this adjustment period, and you're constantly having to fight. Do I push? Do I ask for more money? Do I express thankfulness? How do we get through this when we travel? How do we travel well? How do we do it with a smile? Um, how do I go through the process of playing 10 of my 15 first games on the road without complaining? Feels like we're just a team that's being bought. You're not setting yourself up for the advantages that you have. Like there's 8 games at Baylor and Gonzaga where you're going to win by 20 to 40 points.
Right.
There's no emotional letdown in the fall. And I think I did the best that I could, but I don't know that I did that well. I just was surviving, and then
Yeah.
you're trying to lead in a way where it doesn't overwhelm you. I think you have to make your adjustments there. And I wanted to adjust with the spirit of thankfulness because I am
Mm.
blessed to get this job. There's only 350 in the world. It's hard to get a job like this. You can't spend your time complaining. That's not going to help anybody. Um, and then I think there's this constant balance where confrontation is a normal part of your day. If you bench this guy, you got to live with it. You talk to one of your assistants about something, you got to confront him. If a donor doesn't give the money he says he's going to give, you got to confront him. If practice doesn't go well, you got to confront somebody. If a parent's disappointed, you're getting confronted. If an agent is mad, you're getting confronted. I would say the nonstop life of confrontation. I, I think I handled it as well as I could, but there's no way I can sit around and boast about being great at that. I think you're just doing the best you can to be gracious. And I want people to leave those confrontations. Like confrontation isn't unbiblical, it's actually biblical. But the point of confrontation is end on a solution or a
Right.
resolution. And so my hope was that in all those confrontations, even as I'm yelling at the kids, um, that the solution flows from the confrontation. And that's just not a habit that our culture is into. That they
Yes.
either avoid confrontation or they live in the confrontation part and it escalates. But moving it to the resolution is actually the most worshipful thing you can do. I mean, that's what Matthew 18 is about. So finding a balance on how to live in that, and then what you want your program to feel like. I had one player tell me I don't swear enough and I
Mm.
yell enough.
Had that.
You
I
know,
had that.
I've had staffs, people on my staff said I wasn't big enough jerk to the guys. Um, I pushed back and said Scott didn't swear and barely yelled, and we won the national championship. Tony Dungy functioned a certain way, and it worked. And maybe there's less people that operate that way, but there is a way to do that and have it work. But if you're going to do it that way, you're going to get criticized. So even in the middle of that, you take all the confrontation, and now you have people that you love, either on your staff or in your locker room, criticizing just the personality that God gave you. And so you're I don't know that I handled that really well at all. I just tried to live in the presence of that. And then, this God justifies you, then he sanctifies you, and then he brings you home and glorifies you in his presence. I think the sanctification process your first year as a head coach is real. You should just get ready to have all your weaknesses exposed to you. And then what level of grace and strength can you react to those in? And I think I did the
Amen.
best yeah, and I think I did the best I could, but
Yeah.
if I'm being honest, uh, there had to be some days I failed. There just had to be.
Mhm. You've already touched on a bunch of these, Coach, but I do, if there's another one or two. How did God use your first year at Florida Atlantic to grow you? We've already talked about a couple of them, and you've mentioned them, how
Mm.
God used these times to grow you. Any additional? ones that you would share with coaches across the world on how God used this first year, that you're better now than you were when you took this job?
Yeah, I, I think most growth comes in grace. And Scripture teaches that grace is what leads to obedience, not the law. If the law was sufficient, then obviously we would all obey, but it's grace. And so after my mistake, did I grow? It's not, can I avoid a mistake, but after a mistake, can I grow? The second thing is you get squeezed. Paul Mills, I coach at Wichita State. We were at Baylor together. He says, everybody's like a banana. When you squeeze, you're going to find out what's really inside.
Yeah.
And as your weaknesses get exposed, I think you just find out who you are. And when you're an assistant, whether you mean to or not, you find yourself, especially we were winning so much. I mean, it was ridiculous in some regard. It's probably not even realistic, between the run at Gonzaga and the run at Baylor. Um, you start believing that you know things, and you find out pretty quick that there's plenty of growth to still be had.
Mm,
And whether it's trial, confrontation, losing, your weaknesses being exposed, uh, you're just going to find things out about yourself that I think should change you if you let it. And I'll tell you, A.W. Tozer is one of my favorite authors.
yeah.
And he says pretty clearly that the farther away you are from the Lord, the less you can see about yourself. But as you get closer to his holiness, the more that's going to be revealed.
Mm,
And you're going to see how much farther you really have to go. Because in
yeah.
reality, we get to this place as believers where we become self-righteous and we think we have things figured out, or we begin to become a good person. And as you become closer to the Lord, or your weaknesses are exposed to you, you realize just how far you truly are, that the holiness of God is not something that you should even be boasting of. It's his, and that is given to you by his son. And I think over and over again, the goodness and holiness of God compared to my action was compared, and I was just put in this place of extreme growth. I
Mm,
just was. And if you want the band-aid to be ripped off, and you want to be told where you stink, and you want to see pretty clearly how you could grow, and you want to realize how you speak to your wife inappropriately sometimes because you're frustrated, and you know every weakness about you is about to be exposed. And so in that, can you let the truth and grace of the gospel rest? And you know I just think that happened to me every day. Forget every week, every day something happened to me that just reminded me that um, apart from God, I'm not much.
mm. What'd you take? Throwing this one in, Coach. Throwing this one in. What'd you take from Coach Few and Coach Drew? One or two from each that you used this year in a
Hmm.
significant way.
Yeah, one from Mark. He always put his family time first.
Mm,
I don't quite know how he does it, even after working with him for 3 years. I mean, it's pretty remarkable. He can get done more quicker and in a more talented way than the average coach can. This belief that you've got to work 18 hours a day in order to be good at this job, he just takes that and chucks it to the side. And that's going to be challenge your first year, because if something's not going right, at least my personality is I'll work harder. I
right.
will outwork somebody. I will work harder. And that's probably not always the best answer. And he was the best at finding a balance of when it comes down to working harder and when it just comes down to resting in your convictions, and then letting those convictions ring true, and then realizing our program isn't a reflection of those, but me doing extra crazy things isn't going to get us there any faster. We're going to have to just teach the players to be that way. And so I'll never be able to replace that, because I just frankly don't know that many people in our profession that operate like that. It's almost like he's more secure in himself. Everybody thinks they're secure in themselves, but there's this real insecurity to coaches, and just found in the habits of how long they work. And
Mm,
he doesn't seem to have that. and that was great for me to watch. And there's times where I was even frustrated with my staff, and I thought, man, we should be working more. And then I would just remember Huey and think, okay, well, let's think about that. I don't think robbing my assistants of their family time is going to win us more games. And if it is, then we've got to question: are we good enough at this, or is that really the best way to go about it? Um, and so his convictions and choices there were second to none. It's not even close. Um, and then Scott, to me, is one of the best CEOs in the history of college basketball, and he is as long suffering and patient as you're going to find. To sit there for 5 years after the murder at Baylor and lose and have to sit through all those sanctions. I mean, there's times I didn't want to go 5 days, and he had to sit in that for 5 years.
Mm.
And his ability to delegate as a CEO and use the people around him and hire well. Obviously, a great basketball coach. You're not a Hall of Fame basketball coach. You can't coach basketball. But as good a CEO and as long suffering a man in this profession as you're going to find. And I think sometimes impatience isn't always the answer. And I think head coaches can be abusive verbally. They
Mm.
can be impatient. They cannot show long suffering or grace to their staff or their players. And they just think that being a bully or tyrant is the best way to get something. And I'm not saying it doesn't work. It's worked for many, but it's just not who I want to be. And, watching Scott in that regard, I thought was just a wonderful thing for a long time. And obviously, he stole a bunch of that from his dad, Homer. Um,
Yeah.
and Homer did a great job with both his boys. But I will say the day that I was told I don't swear enough, I called Scott Drew, and he was like, "Who cares?" It's just Satan's trying to tell you something that isn't real, and you just need to
That's right.
reject that, be yourself, and stick to who God's called you to be. And yeah, if I could hold fast in the conviction that you don't have to overwork people to be successful, and then if I can be patient with people in such a way that they want to be here and want to give me their best, they're not forced to give me their best, they want to, because they see that I love their families and I let them
Yeah.
spend time with them. I'm hoping that the guys that work here say they get to be here. I'm not forcing them to be here.
Yeah.
um, and that's a hard balance, but I watched two guys do it pretty well.
That's good stuff. Landing the plane, coach. We're landing the
Okay.
plane. Final question. All this great information, incredible. What advice? Guys about to get a job. What would you give in a nutshell? Two, three, four, five, as much as you want to teach. About to get a job. You're at coffee with them. You got a 30 minutes with them, 10 minutes with them, whatever God would allow. What advice would you give him as he's getting ready to walk into his press conference? He's getting ready to accept this job. He's off on the journey that you just started.
Hmm.
First year, what advice to future head coaches?
Yeah, my first advice would be that there's this time prior to that you think you're ready, and Satan's going to use that to just make you impatient and frustrate you and cause you to get wrapped up in things that have nothing to do with your daily ministry and how you're supposed to be loving your players. And you're going to end up frustrated for 12 to 24 to 36 months because you think it should have been your turn already. And
Mm,
my advice is that you just should not live there. It's just not helpful.
that's
And
good.
you're probably 1 or 2 years away from being ready anyway, if that's how you think. And that's probably my first piece of advice.
That's good.
And if God is sovereign, then you being a baby isn't going to help his timing at all.
Mm,
Um, I would say the second thing is that when it comes to time to do your interview and time to give your press conference, just pray beforehand and be yourself. There's going to be times where you're told no, and there's going to be times where you leave and they tell you yes, and you might tell them no. Both happened to me. Um, and so when and if it's time, it's better for it to be time because you were yourself instead of pretending to be somebody else. In the press conference, I would say the same. The very first thing I did in my press conference was tell people about my faith. I feel like if I didn't do that first, I'd be lying to everybody. It doesn't
yeah.
mean that at a state school. That's all I talk about. It doesn't mean that that's, something I'm trying to self-righteously propose so I can feel good about myself. It's just the truth about who I am. And I would spend as much time making that the truth about who you are, because at the end of the day, when things go bad, and they will, everyone's going to turn to something. They're going to turn to alcohol. They're going to turn to a lack of sleep. They're going to turn to their faith. It can be a number of different things, but I would just say if you start in that, then it's more likely that you live in that when you're going through the hard stuff. And then I would say that coaches pretty much, and this is not to every coach, I'm just going to speak to Christian coaches right now. Uh, Christian coaches can be in the habit of doing this job with no church, no support, no
Mm,
mentorship, no discipleship. And then they just think they're going to do it in all their own strength. And then God's going to hop on board and bless them. And I just don't think that that's how this thing works. It doesn't work in other professions that way. I don't know why coaches think it works that way in this profession. And uh, maybe the last thing I'll say is just that we believe that winning is the goal, and it is. Listen, if we don't win, we're getting fired. And I'm only here because I got to hang out with a bunch of people that won a lot of games, and God just happened to put me in some good spots. And clearly, winning is a part of this deal, but it is not the main thing. And I'm just to tell you, husband, dad, husband, dad, and follower of Christ, and then you get to coach. And you know, I just think that you're going to spend all this time making this the thing that identifies you. The thing that God's given you to use to change people's lives is going to turn into an idol in your own life.
mm,
And that's probably the very worst thing you could do with a basketball is to
right.
let it turn into an idol. And the idolatry of that or this or my profession, man, was it exposed to me this year. And I would just I'm just speaking to the people who believe what you and I believe about Christ. Um, Fight as hard as you can to stay away from that. And then you're going to judge things based on winning and losing and money and no money a lot. And I would probably judge it more on the fruits of the spirit in your own heart, head. And I would say that I didn't do a great job there this year. And I wish I could go back and change some things, but I can't. And so maybe the thing flowing out of that is at the end of year one, you're going to have a chance to do it again. And then what are you going to address? You got to address your winning. You got to address your offense. You got to address your defense. Our offense was okay. Our defense could have been much better. Um, you're going to be defined by your one possession games. You know this. We were 1-4 in our one possession games to start the season. Then in league, we won a couple one possession games and won in a 6-game winning streak. I mean, so much of this is going to be decided by 3 points or less, especially in league
Sure.
play. I mean, you know
Yeah.
that you're not avoiding that. Every once in a while, you get a team like we had a Baylor that you're winning all your games by double digits, but you could do this 40 years and that's not going to happen. You're ultimately going to be, if we go 4-1 in those one possession games, everybody feels different about everything.
Right.
So you're going to have to address all those things, but you get this unique time in June and July and August to address who you are as a person. And I would just say again, um, you should be a better person and a better coach now than you were a year ago. So how do you make that true? And then how do you express that in a way that the people around you um, know that you're giving them a chance to grow and they're going to in return give you a chance to grow, because our staff is going to be better next year than they were last year.
Yeah.
They are. And there's times where it feels like we're trying to fix everything that happened in one week, and that's just not how things work. There has to be this organic growth that you allow, and some of it's going to come through confrontation, and some of it's going to be because people just naturally want to be better, and some of it because maybe we'll build a team that's more reflective of our staff's personality or abilities. But I would say, just like I started by saying before you even get the interview, you know, you might be a year to 2 to 3 years away.
Yeah.
I would say postseason of your first season is just as important as your first season. And so what are you doing in your postseason to make yourself better? I would want my athletic department, my players, my staff, my family at the end of year two to be like, man, listen, you can't control everything about that first year. But if you want to see somebody who took it on the chin, lived in grace, and allowed that to make him better, um, Coach Jakus was able to do that. And that'd probably be my last piece of advice about the first year
Mm.
is if it changes your second year, then just like every mistake we make in life, it just ends up being something that God uses us to make them more like Him. So that'd probably be my last piece of advice for you.
Coaches, I want to repeat one thing Coach said. June, July, and August. Use that time to become a better person after your first year. It's incredibly important that we allow God to use our circumstances, our failures, our successes in our first year as being a head coach to grow us as people. And so, coaches, this has been incredibly rich. I can see across the country that I would want you guys to watch this 2 or 3 times. This is one that maybe you put on your phone and you watch 2 or 3 times as you prepare to be a head coach. Second, if I was preparing, if I was close, if I was one of those guys, Coach Jakus, that was a year or 2 away, I would want to make my way down to Boca Raton at some point and visit with you. If somebody wanted more time with you, I know your time is precious. If they wanted to connect with you and get a little bit more, talk a little bit more, what would be the best way for you for them to do that?
Well, Jim Good's undefeated. Uh, he asked me to speak at a church forum. He asked me to speak with you. I mean, if there's somebody who reaches out to nations coaches and asks for that, the answer is going to be yes.
Okay.
When they do reach out, you just give them my cell phone or my email, and they can come down and visit anytime. I just had a college coach yesterday, and a young NBA assistant today that are both kind of believers or Christians or know a little bit about the way we do things, and they asked to come visit us this fall, and we said yes to both. And so, um, to me, this is still about mentorship and changing people's lives. I'm only here because Scott and Mark gave me a chance, and forget not even Scott and Mark, Grant McCaslin and Tommy Lloyd and our coaching tree and Jerome Tang and Paul Mills. And
Yeah.
as the trees expanded and grown, I was the latest to the tree, and I'm only in this deal because they gave me a chance. So if I can help somebody and that help includes them coming down and spending time with us, that'd be great. And then the great thing about that is if you just reach out to us through Nations of Coaches, when you come, Jim Good's going to be here. And if you've never had a character coach or you want to know what he does on a weekly basis to encourage, stand by, pray, and confront me in a real way, you're going to get to sit with him for an hour, and he's going to
Yeah.
tell you what it might be like to have somebody in your life. And I just think it's an incredibly wise decision. So if you get to watch a couple practices and then learn what it means to have a Nations of Coaches guy in your life full time, it'd probably be worth your trip.
So, coaches, if you want to reach out to Coach Jakus, you want to come down, watch a practice. My cell phone number is 843-509-3824. Call me, text me. I'll make sure you connect with Jim Good, and Jim Good can get you to practice and get you some time with Coach Jakus. If you want to email, bradebaugh@nationsofcoaches.com. Coach, this has been amazing. This has been a blessing. This has been informative and encouraging, and it's been honoring to our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. And I thank you for what you stand for. I thank you for how you're coaching young people. I thank you, Coach, that you're telling your kids you love them over 100 times in a season. I did the same thing, and I'm excited to follow you, continue to follow you, to watch FAU grow and continue to be one of the best teams in the country. And thank you Thank you for spending time with us today.
I appreciate you having me, and I just thank you for all you're doing for coaches. Like you all say, who's going to coach the coaches? And
Uh,
this is just me giving back to y'all because you have done that for me. So thank you. And if there's any good thing in all, that's God's grace and what others have taught me. So I appreciate the fact that I get to help you.
Absolutely. Thank you.